for variable management. This automotive news webinar is brought to you by vAuto. We're delighted you're with us for this presentation. I'm Emma Hancock, host, strategist, and moderator at Automotive News. Before I introduce our speaker today, a navigation tip. We encourage you to ask questions at any time. Just type them into the Q&A box on the left side of the webinar window and then hit send. I will steer your questions to our speaker toward the end of the session. Today's speaker is Patrick James, Senior Director of vAuto Strategic Planning for Profit Time GPS, Provision, and Conquest, vAuto's new and used vehicle management solutions. Patrick brings more than 30 years of automotive industry knowledge to Team vAuto, having previously managed day-to-day operations as a dealership general manager for 10 years. Patrick knows firsthand the importance of having a vehicle management system that is built to optimize ROI and support the dealer's strategy. Before his dealership experience, he spent the first half of his career working with dealers across the country in several field offices for an OEM. And now I'll turn it over to Patrick to get us started.
Well, thank you, Emma. I am so grateful for the opportunity to be here today. And I'm going to give a shameless plug because I'm coming to you live from the campus of Northwood University, from the office of the chair of automotive marketing and management, the legend, LG Bright. Many of you may know, there might be some alumni out there. And I have the honor of teaching up here on behalf of Cox Automotive. And I just spent the morning with some of the aspiring students that just could be your next industry leaders for your dealers out there. So a great morning, and now I'm happy to share our topic today and the 5 reasons for why now is a time for, maybe a little different approach to inventory management. So you may have heard or read blogs from our founder, Dale Pollack, that back as early as 2017, he had a hunch. He felt that we were focused on the wrong thing. Too much polarization with the calendar and pricing cars to market aggressively, but then we were like unilaterally lowering prices consistently until they went away. Velocity at one speed was what we were working on. Well, velocity at one speed across all of our used car inventory. His hunch led him to believe that we were not focused enough on investment return. So now I'd like to take you back well before 2017 to a movie released in 2011. Now, mind you, the movie was about a baseball season that actually happened in 2002. So that's over 20 years ago. And in my recollection, this was probably the first time I had heard the use of data science in something that made any sense to anybody other than, of course, data scientists. The opening frame of the movie is a quote from Mickey Mantle. He says, "It's unbelievable how much you don't know about the game you've been playing all your life." Now just pause for a minute. And I suspect that there are many career car guys and gals that are viewing this very webinar today. And I think we can all agree that we could say that about the car business over the past 3 years for sure. Now, the premise of the movie of Moneyball starts with the Oakland A's playing the New York Yankees. And the payroll investment for Oakland is just under $40 million. The New York Yankees, over $114 million. Now, it's the American League Division Series, and the Yankees come back and beat the A's. The A's are gutted after that season. Their best players that were free agents were coaxed away with big money by none other than the Yankees that they actually lost to in the series. After the season, the A's GM, Billy Beane, goes to the owner and says, "Hey, I need more money for better players if you want to win a World Series." And the owner says, "Listen, you're a small market GM. We're not going to pay tens of millions of dollars for each player like the Yankees. Work with what you have, Billy." I think about that. And it kind of sounds like a conversation that a owner of a dealership could have with a GM, right? Or maybe a GM could have with a used car manager. I'm just spitballing here, right? So how do I tie this Moneyball movie into today's automotive market? Now, Billy Beane and the GM decides that if he can't woo big money players, he finds Peter Brand, a Yale economics grad that is working in baseball as his first job out of college. And Peter uses first-generation data science to identify the best statistically undervalued players in the market. And here we are, 20 years later, and over 89% of today's big data, more importantly, data science, has been generated in the past 2 years. So the question is it time to apply big data and data science to determine the investment value of a used car? We'll get back to that idea in a bit. But let's move into the 5 reasons now is the time for a different approach to used inventory management. The first one, the used car market is more volatile than ever, in more ways than ever. Depreciation, pricing, sourcing, there's no one-size-fits-all way to look at any of them. Today's conditions require a more responsive strategy that treats each vehicle according to its unique ROI potential. We call the new strategy variable management. Continuing to treat each used vehicle we acquire or try to acquire with a handful of data points that we simply eyeball and then we try to weight their significance in our heads, this is no longer effective. Values reflecting supply and demand are now different by vehicle age, price, segment, and market. Depreciation isn't the same for every vehicle. For example, as interest rates have been rising, the average car payment has gone up over 11% since the Fed went on their inflation fighting spree. It's really no surprise that the top 10 models with the most depreciation right now participate in the luxury automobile segment. Affordability has had an impact. And though many thought they could do no wrong with demand for used cars well exceeding supply, that is beginning to soften. And I think you all see it. And one-size-fits-all pricing doesn't account for each vehicle's price sensitivity or your ability to sell it. Some cars are winners, some are losers, and the rest are in between. Today's optimal inventory mix is different and more varied for every dealer. You can't trust just past sales to tell you what tomorrow's customer wants. Auctions and trade-ins, they just aren't enough to grow sales. And I don't need to tell you how tricky it is to find a good investment at auction. Multi-channel sourcing from inside and outside of your store has become the new normal. Then there's the resurgence of new car inventories, which will put pressure on used vehicle demand. And with the return of factory incentives, it's going to put pressure on used pricing as well. It will be best to complement your new car strategy with used vehicles, not compete. That brings us to reason number 2. So what causes margin compression in the used car market? Now, most used to say it was everyone racing to the bottom, or as we at vAuto like to say, racing to the customer. But I believe most of the margin compression you're going to experience going forward with a slowing economy will be having too much invested in cars where the demand is softening. But our data proves that this does not happen unilaterally. A shift to variable management can help mitigate these profitability pressures by showing you how to treat each vehicle differently according to its unique profit potential for your dealership and your market. Applying data science allows you to know which cars need to be priced with urgency to move, and just importantly, which cars deserve to be treated with patience. That is, which units can be priced higher to realize actual more gross. Now, as you can see here, the wholesale index is off to a very strong start. Now, this supports the complaints I hear from dealers at auction that are saying the prices are through the roof. But the retail index so far this year is heading in the other direction, trending below last year and are showing the signs of softening demand. It will take a sharp operator to maximize profit with high wholesale prices and softening retail prices. In our movie, the GM, Billy Bean, was confronted by his head scout, questioning his reliance on data to pick the best players, rather than the scout's 30 years of experience recruiting players. Billy's answer was adapt or die. Now, that's a bit harsh, but being a student of the business is likely why you chose to listen in today. Knowing what the market is doing and preparing to adapt is how you can outflank others in that very same market. All right, let's go to reason number 3. No one wants to remember the gross profit losers they retail. As a matter of fact, I was a GM for a store where the owner believed there was a butt for every seat. Aged inventory didn't scare him one bit. Every time we had the debate, he'd show me a car from one of his other stores that had been there 90 days, and they made $3,000 on it. I thought it was funny because I could never get any more data from that store, like the 10 other units just like it, that they used write-down money from the fresh units to offset the thousands of dollars lost on those other aged units. But even if you would never let a car age like that, I'm sure if you look back at those gross profit losers, you likely just paid too much. Or maybe the market turned on you. But remember, it's a variable market. I get it. We had to make a great deal on the other car, or maybe the other car was one of those misfit new toys built by the factory. We were taking a trade on it, right? That infamous unicorn that you got the call from your district manager, and he started the conversation with, "I'm from the factory and I'm here to help." I know that drill because I started in my automotive career pushing Stanza wagons and Pulsars on dealers well before I moved into retail. How about last November and December as a fresh, memorable example of how today's market can turn? I've heard more than one dealer say the market changed fast, like overnight back then, and cars lost value quickly. The bottom line is someone likely waited until the 7th inning stretch instead of pricing those low potential cars to move out of your inventory in the 1st inning like they should have. And that's exactly the situation a variable management approach helps you avoid. Through the data science, you'll know on day one when you have a car that you had to put too much in it, has low demand, or in the system, we call it a bronze vehicle. And it's one that likely is going to cause you retail trouble. You see, we've done the work that Peter Brand, the college grad from Yale with an economics degree, did for Billy Bean and the Oakland A's. We can deliver appraising and pricing recommendations to ensure you sell even a low potential vehicle fast. It's time to stop pretending troubled cars will improve over time. The key is knowing, then managing a troubled car from day one. Now, with our ability to evaluate over 13,000 dealerships' used car inventories, we know that these retail challenged or bronze cars make up a big part of a dealer's used inventory. Now, there's no shame in having bronze cars. They're a fact of life, as dealers need to do what they need to do to make deals. And human nature is what it is. We're going to make deals. However, there is shame in not treating bronze cars for what they are. That's why there has never been a better time to leverage data science and know when you have one of these vehicles and provide a data-based recommendation on how to price these vehicles day one to move them quickly. Let's be clear here. Increased carrying cost is back, especially as interest rates climb and floor plan expense becomes a factor that we once had the pleasure of ignoring over the past several years. That is not where the road ahead is taking us. Now, my favorite quote in the Moneyball movie is when the GM, Billy Bean, asks his data genius, Peter Brand, "Would you rather get a bullet in the head or 5 to the chest and bleed to death?" Now, the response is priceless from Peter. He says, "Are those my only 2 choices?" But I think we could say hanging on to that low profit opportunity car way too long and then having to blow it out for a big loss might be like the 5 in the chest and bleeding to death. On the other hand, taking in a car with high potential profit, pricing it too low and selling it in a matter of hours, knowing you left money on the table, it's the bullet to the head. So that leads us to number 4, the high potential vehicle. Just like you don't want to hang on to low potential cars too long and bleed, you can't afford to cheap sell your best used vehicles for the sake of volume. Yet that's how many dealers continue to operate, mostly because they don't know any better. But what I mean, there's no data telling them that this is a platinum car, as we call it in our system. In a recent conversation with one of our vAuto performance managers, he shared the reality of month end. See if this sounds familiar. Managers worry about hitting their volume goals and their bonus money. So what do? They cheap sell the cars they know are the best ones, those platinum ones, right? And they puff their chests out when they rip a trade from a customer who's like stoked because he's getting such a great deal on a car that even they know they should have paid a lot more money for. Then, as a new month starts, dealers are amazed at how traffic and sales in the showrooms turn into ghost towns. Why? Because all the cars that bring in the customers, the platinum ones, they went out the door. So last month didn't go into extra innings. Variable management can help end this profit-damaging monthly cheap selling ritual. When I began at Cox Automotive, I was a vAuto performance manager, working with dealers like you to use software to achieve better outcomes. At the time, I was clearly trained. This system is not called vAutomatic. We have insights, but the user has to look at those data points and ultimately make the determination what to put in the car and what to price it at. We have now arrived at the payoff of where this 89% of the big data we have to process has come alive in just the past 2 years. This is why we put the likes of Peter Brand and Moneyball, the Yale economics grad, to work on delivering algorithms that can recommend how much to appraise a vehicle for and price a vehicle to achieve the optimum gross profit with a variable approach to days to sell. Folks, this system is here and dealers are seeing superior outcomes. Number 5, it works. While some dealers finished 2022 down from the historic highs of 2021, other dealers extended their success. Their secret? They went beyond the one-size-fits-all approach of velocity and moved to variable management, leveraging our profit time GPS solution. The proof is in the numbers. This is a comparison of profit time GPS dealers to our very own vAuto provision inventory management dealers. All in the same family here, right? Using our 2 different levels of systems. While the market we experienced had every dealer averaging more gross profit per car. No secret there than they did in 2019. But the variable management dealers, those on profit time GPS, were doing even better, to the tune of 17.3% more total gross and an even richer net profit in their used vehicle department. Yes, we saw volume and gross profit improve, which means following our appraising and pricing recommendations using proven data science to make better decisions works. At the end of the Moneyball movie, after the data science-driven Oakland A's set an all-time winning streak record of 20 straight wins, the A's GM Billy Beane gets invited to Boston to consider a job for the Red Sox. Billy looks at the owner of the Red Sox and says, "Why did you ask me to come here?" Implying that he's a small market GM, right? The owner says, "Billy, you had the same wins as the New York Yankees this season, but the difference is the Yankees' investment in player payroll per win was $1.4 million, and your team was only $260,000 per win. We want a piece of that." Since the application of data science to the baseball world, you can continue to see evidence of it today, over 20 years ago. And you can see it on major league ballpark scoreboards. As a kid, for me, it was simply batting average, home runs, and RBIs. Now it's on-base percentages and slugging percentages, which are different, don't you know? They both measure total number of bases a player records per at-bat, but one excludes walks and getting hit by a pitch. Apparently that's important. As the Oakland A's introduced a new way of looking at players and performance that had never been considered or accounted for in the past, the same is true for our data science. We're introducing a new way to gauge used vehicles and their probable performance. If this can predict the best outcomes for the great American pastime, don't you think it's time we apply a fully data-driven approach to optimizing your outcomes on each used vehicle you acquire and market? Now, this morning I was with a large dealer group on the webcam as we were teaching the class. It's a large dealer group in the Midwest. They were talking about their biggest fear with the market right now. And he said their biggest fear is that dealers, like themselves, have been in a profit coma. I love that line. No one wants to give anything back now that the market's shifting. So their group is leveraging every piece of technology to operate smarter than the others in the market. And I commend them for digging deep to stay ahead of this. So I would say now, we might call it the semi-automatic. It might be more fitting, as we now provide recommendations. The data science is good, but it's not perfect on every car. So let's be clear. And dealers have every right to do what they need to do. We see our top performing variable management dealers aligning vehicle appraisals and prices to our recommendations about 75 to 85% of the time. Now, a similar dynamic plays out in baseball. Managers still make in-the-moment judgment calls that defy the data science, but still see positive outcome. So there's still a human element and an art to some of this. And I share this to echo Dale's point that even with our data science, you can't take off your car hat. In the words of the famous Yogi Berra, the future ain't what it used to be. Just let that sink in for a minute. So if you want to win in a variable market, now is the time to make your move to variable management of your used vehicle inventory. Thanks for your time today, and I think we'll open it up for some questions.
Patrick, thank you. Great presentation. Love the Moneyball references. I was quite curious about that bullet reference. I didn't know there was an option C, so I'm glad you clarified that. So we're going to turn it over to the audience for some questions and see if we can get through most of them. Okay, so I'm going to start with one here that I think a lot of us would like to know. What solutions do you have for buying private party vehicles?
Well, yeah, great question. We have recently integrated with, it's called VAN, Vehicle Acquisition Network. And we are bringing those private party listings. They have, the numbers that I hear from them is right around 800,000 private party listings that they've been able to aggregate out of the market. And we're able to provide our dealers with an integration to where you can search those vehicles and then appraise them right out of Profit Time GPS. So that is a source that we're starting to bring those types of listings in for you to be able to work with. Because what we hear from dealers every day is, I need whatever it is you're going to bring me. If it's auction or if it's private party listings, if it's my service appointments, if it's my Kelley Blue Book instant cash offer leads, I got to have them where I can see them in vAuto, because that's where I want to attack them. That's where I want to put the money on them, and that's where I want to be able to manage them. So we're working to that end to bring all of those sources into vAuto, and that's one that we recently integrated with, and we actually announced that integration here back at NADA.
That's great. So there's basically no source that's unaccounted for.
No, I mean, again, there are some requirements for what software you have to bring in, like if you have Xtime or VIN Solutions service appointments, we can bring those in to your system, and you can start appraising your vehicles in your service lane, so on and so forth. Yep.
Great. Okay, another question here. How can you help us with margin compression? Auction pricing is at an all-time high, but retail values are now dropping. You touched on that. We don't want to go back to a race to the bottom with price being the competitive advantage.
Yeah, it's, and this is you're going to be like, oh, he's going right back to the stump speech. But, trying to determine what to pay for that car is really going to be highly driven by the market you're in, right? So we're such believers in local market data. And that's really what vAuto was built on, right? That live market view that says, there are sometimes markets within markets, right? When you set up that competitive set and you try to find what can I really retail this car for? And that's where this data science is starting to come in. Before it was, hey, let's just look at the average list price on the internet and see where you might compete. With the data science, we're now looking at all the demand metrics around that. How fast is that car moving in the market? What's the volume of it? What is the demand that we're seeing through, Auto Trader and other areas that show us demand metrics on who's looking for the car? We're bringing that in through this data science so that though someone might look at that car and say, there's no way I'm paying that kind of money for it, I'll never make a profit. If you've got data science and you've got it developed to the level that we do, you just might find, and we're hearing this from our dealers, that there are cars that have some margin in them. You're just looking at different data, and you have more sophisticated algorithms to make that projection. And that gives you a lot of confidence if you're going to step up on a car that you really don't want to, because guess what? You got that guidebook out there, right? You're looking at Black Book, you're looking at MMR, and you're saying, no way, I'm not paying more than that. It's all about the data you're looking at, whether you're really seeing the true picture of what the margin opportunity is. And, I mentioned it about the bronze cars, right? I mean, bronze cars are low retail potential cars. They're not, they're not designed, when you bring them in, that they're probably not going to make a big gross margin. But, hey, they are a unit that as long as you can get out of them and not lose money on them, they still generate F&I gross. They still generate parts and service gross. It keeps the machine moving. So it's a balance of those different types of cars.
And do you think people should be thinking about a different list, like with the depreciation on luxury vehicles? Maybe when you're sourcing, there's vehicles out there that you would never have been able to bring in that might be an option now.
Yeah, I think, when you have the best data, it allows you to search and go look for types of vehicles that maybe your historical sales never proved that you could sell those kinds of vehicles, right? But if there's an opportunity and it's driven by a margin opportunity, not, hey, I've never had one of those, and not the last one we had, we didn't sell. Yeah. If there is a margin opportunity, that allows you to source with a different objective in mind, right? Trying to find cars that you can actually make margin on rather than, oh, we just want more of the same of what we had.
Exactly. Okay, next question. So we have EV charging solutions. How can we share that with dealerships? Is there a need for that?
All right, you got to clarify that a little bit for us. So we have what? Easy?
This is from Joni. Maybe we'll come back to that. Joni, if you want to clarify your question about EV charging solutions, I'm going to move on to another question. This is from Jay. If you have 100 cars a day in your service lane, what would be reasonable number of purchases?
I'm just picking this up because, again, I'm a pirate, right? I just, steal everybody else's good ideas. That's just, how I operate. So I made a career out of it. So it's been good. But when the conferences that I've been to, and I've seen several presentations on really harvesting that service drive, most dealers are looking for a 3 to 5% conversion of their repair order traffic each day. So that's, or by month, I should back that up, right? Looking at each day, you could break it down to by day, but they look at the volume of customer pay repair order that they're doing monthly, and they set up a goal to get 3 to 5% of those cars purchased out of the service lane. That's the number that seems to be pretty consistent in all these presentations I've seen. And these are, by the way, these are from really good operators that are doing an awesome job, in their service drive. So I trust they know what they're doing.
Yeah. Okay. This is a nice sort of question for, I think, a lot of the audience. If you had to explain variable management in 2 sentences or less, how would you describe it? What's the elevator pitch?
Yeah, I'll put it in the, car guy and gal speak, right? We believe there are no bad used cars.
Yeah.
There are just some that you should expect to make more and some that you should expect to make less.
Right.
But the key is being able to consistently leverage the right data to identify and manage these cars' profit potential. And no longer unilaterally just lower prices based on the calendar until they disappear. So that is the real fundamental shift that we've made with variable management versus the old, straight line velocity method, which was, price them as high as you can and then just keep lowering them until they go away.
Like that reference of the 90-day car from that general manager.
Right.
It's all a mystery, that one. So here's another question. I think, I'm certainly thinking this. Is there a learning curve to adopting variable management? Like how quickly can we get onto this?
Yeah, again, the data science kind of makes it easy. We're going to give you pricing recommendations. We're going to give you investment recommendations based on the appraisal that's going to shorten that learning curve. The key is, can car guys and gals trust it, right? Because we all have our own way of looking at things, and it's difficult for dealers and managers to adjust to variable management since they're used to kind of managing vehicles like they're all the same, And now you got to look at each vehicle on its own and trust in these recommendations. And we have data now that proves out if you'll do that, you're going to see, significant improvement in your outcomes. But that's the part that you have to buy into. And we're very adamant about that when we launch a dealer on that. We want to see that 70 to 80% alignment with our pricing recommendations. When dealers do that, we get the big wow. When they go in and say, well, you know what, I think I'll price my bronze cars, the way I want to price them because I don't like, pricing them so low because I want to make money. But I'll price these platinum cars the way you want me to do them because I can make money on those. When you start mixing it up, you don't have the effectiveness of the whole portfolio generating that total gross and volume that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. So I think we've got time for one more question here. Again, variable management focused. What advice would you give a dealer trying to shift their mindset from velocity to variable management?
Yeah, I would start this one with a question. We used to do this as performance managers. We were trained to, ask a lot of questions before we dug in with some, before we started preaching. So, if we all agree that we can make money on a used car when we buy it, all right, I think everybody likes that idea. And if Peter Brand, right, our guy from the movie, changed the way we evaluated baseball players 20 years ago, I think we can all agree that today's data science, with the progress we've made in the last couple of years, could probably really improve the evaluation of pricing your used cars and help your managers put them on the right money to move in the optimal amount of time to give you the return on investment. So my advice really is, to make this shift, it really comes from that discipline of trusting the data science, and accepting for 80% of your cars that appraisal and pricing recommendation. Now, we know there's some outliers, and there's a truck that's got a lift kit on it, and the data can't completely find a bunch of cars like that. I get all that. But to the core, you want to be consistent with our recommendations. And when we do that, and we see dealers adopt this level of discipline, I'll use the last pun of the day, right? We see most of these guys making it to the playoffs at the end of the year. How about that?
Nice, Patrick. Well, I think we're at the end of our webinar.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Emma. It's been great, and I've really enjoyed working with you on this.
Yeah, it's been great. I want to thank today's audience for the questions. And if you did have a question that we didn't get a chance to answer, our friends at vAuto will follow up by email. If you learned something from this session, please tell your peers about it. The recording will be available in about an hour. You'll find it at autonews.com/webinars. When the webinar ends, a survey will pop up on your screen. We genuinely appreciate your feedback as it helps us create future webinars that are even more beneficial to you. Thanks again to Patrick and vAuto for bringing us this presentation, and to you for joining us. On behalf of everyone at Automotive News, have a great rest of your day.